There's something profoundly unfair about working your entire life and reaching 60 without being able to say no, without being able to change jobs because you need the health insurance, without being able to help your children because every month is a battle against the bills, without being able to sleep peacefully because you know any emergency will bring you down. And the worst part is that this doesn't just happen to those who earned little. It also happens to those who earned a lot but never learned to protect what they had. Because it turns out that $40,000 a year doesn't determine how rich you'll be. It determines how peaceful your future will be. And that difference changes everything. Most people believe that money is an income problem, that if you earn more, you live better, that if you reach a certain salary level, everything gets resolved. But the reality is different. The reality is that you can earn $100,000 a year and be more financially stressed than someone who earns 40. You can have a college degree, a good job, a new car in your driveway, and be completely trapped. Because what really matters isn't how much comes in. It's how much space remains between what comes in and what goes out. That space is what Warren would call margin, and margin is the only thing that buys freedom. Let me explain something that few people understand until it's too late. When you earn $40,000 a year, you have two paths. One is to spend $39,900. The other is to spend $35,000. On paper, the difference seems small, $4,900 a year, $400 a month. But in real life, that difference is enormous, because those $4,900 aren't just money. They're margin. They're the space that allows you to breathe when something goes wrong. They're the difference between making decisions out of necessity or out of choice. They're the line between living with fear or living with control. And here's the problem. Most people, when they start earning $40,000, don't think about margin. They think about what they can now afford. They think about the car they deserve after so much effort. About the bigger apartment because it's time to live better. About the vacations they could never take. And little by little, without realizing it, they turn those $40,000 into a floor, not a ceiling. They turn income into obligation. And when you do that, when you fill all the available space with fixed expenses, you lose something that isn't easily recovered. You lose options, because the trap isn't earning little. The trap is living at the limit of what you earn. And this happens to everyone. To the person earning $30,000, to the one earning $60,000, to the one earning $120,000. There's an invisible force that pushes people to adjust their life to the exact size of their paycheck. It's as if the money that comes in automatically creates a vacuum that needs to be filled. And you fill it with a newer car, with a higher monthly payment, with subscriptions you don't even use, with a bigger house that requires more maintenance, more taxes, more insurance, more of everything. And suddenly, even though you're earning twice what you did 5 years ago, you don't have more margin than before. You have more things, but the same anxiety. Warren explains it in a very simple way. He says that successful people learn to say no. No to the expense you don't need. No to the social pressure to keep up appearances. No to the more expensive version of something when the simple version works just as well. And this isn't stinginess. This is strategy. Because every time you say no to an unnecessary expense, you're saying yes to something much more valuable. You're saying yes to margin, to options, to peace of mind. But the culture pushes you in the opposite direction. It tells you that if you can pay the monthly payment, you can afford it. And that's one of the most destructive lies of modern life. Because being able to pay the monthly payment doesn't mean you can afford it. It means you can go into debt for it. And every time you go into debt for something that depreciates, every time you turn a future income into a present obligation, you're selling your freedom. You're mortgaging your margin. You're buying stress on installments. Think about the car. Most people in the United States have a monthly car payment. $300, $400, $500. And they see it as something normal, as part of adult life. But that payment isn't neutral. That payment is a commitment you make every month for 5, 6, 7 years. It's money you can't use for emergencies, money you can't invest, money you can't save. And the worst part is that the car starts losing value from the moment you drive it off the lot. So you end up paying for something that's worth less and less, while your margin gets smaller and smaller. And the same thing happens with housing. People hear that housing is an investment, that paying rent is throwing money away, and there's some truth to that, but there's also a huge trap. Because when you buy a house that's at the limit of what you can pay, when you stretch your budget to get something bigger, nicer, in a better area, you're not investing. You're buying a financial prison, because that house comes with taxes, with maintenance, with unexpected repairs, with a monthly payment you can't miss. And suddenly, instead of having margin, you have an obligation that chases you every 30 days. And here's the point that changes everything. When you don't have margin, when you live at the limit of your income, you develop what Warren describes as a scarcity mindset. You start making decisions from fear. You accept jobs you hate because you need the paycheck. You stay in toxic work relationships because you can't afford to quit. You say yes to overtime you don't want to do. You avoid going to the doctor because you don't know if you can pay the copay. And all that constant pressure changes you. It makes you smaller, more cautious, more scared. Not because you're weak, but because you're operating without a safety net. And this isn't just about money. This is psychology. When you live without margin, your brain enters survival mode. And in survival mode, you don't think long term. You don't build. You don't invest in yourself. You just try to make it to the next month. And that keeps you trapped in a cycle that's very hard to break, because every decision you make from fear reinforces the situation that scares you. It's a vicious circle. But there's another way. There's a way of living that doesn't depend on earning more, although earning more helps. It depends on protecting the margin, on creating space between what you earn and what you spend. And that space, even if it's small at first, changes everything. Because when you have margin, even if it's just $500 a month, you start thinking differently. You start making different decisions. You start building. The first thing margin does is give you an emergency fund. And an emergency fund isn't a luxury. It's the foundation of everything. Because when you have $1,000 saved, a flat tire isn't a crisis. It's an inconvenience. When you have $3,000 saved, an unexpected medical bill doesn't destroy you. When you have 6 months of expenses saved, you can quit a job that's killing you. You can negotiate your salary with confidence. You can say no to situations that don't work for you. And that changes your identity. You stop being someone who reacts and become someone who chooses. And this is exactly what Warren has been saying for decades. That money isn't for impressing anyone. That money is for having options. That the goal isn't to buy things that make you look rich. The goal is to have enough margin so you don't have to worry. So you don't have to borrow money from anyone. So you can help the people you love when they need it. So you can make decisions that benefit your life in the long term, not just your situation in the moment. But building margin requires something that goes against modern culture. It requires saying no. It requires living below your means, not at the limit of them. It requires buying the used car instead of the new one. Staying in the smaller apartment a couple more years. Cooking at home when all your friends are eating out. And that's hard. It's hard because we live in a society that judges your worth by what you consume, by the car you drive, by the neighborhood where you live, by the brands you wear. And when you choose to live with margin, when you choose simplicity, you become invisible to that system. But that's exactly what you want. Because while everyone else is competing to keep up appearances, you're building something real. And here's the irony. The people who live with margin, who save 10 or 15% of their income, who avoid stupid debt, who stay away from the consumption race, those people don't look rich. They look normal. They look average. But in 20, 30 years, when everyone else is stressed, trapped, scared, they're calm. They have options. They can retire if they want. They can help their children. They can change careers. They can live without fear. And all because they made boring but correct decisions when they were earning $40,000 a year. Because margin doesn't just protect your present. It builds your future. Every dollar you don't spend today is a dollar that works for you tomorrow. And I'm not talking about getting rich quick. I'm talking about something much more powerful. I'm talking about emotional compound interest, about how small, consistent decisions create massive effects over time, about how living with margin for 10 years puts you in a completely different position than living at the limit. Imagine two people. Both earned $40,000 a year. The first one spends $39,900. The second spends $35,000. After 10 years, the difference isn't just $49,000 saved. The difference is in mindset, in identity, in bargaining power. The first person is more stressed than ever, more in debt, more trapped. The second has a solid emergency fund, has options, has peace of mind, and that peace of mind allows them to make better decisions, which give them more margin, which give them more options, and so on. It's a virtuous circle, and what's fascinating is that none of this requires a high IQ. It doesn't require advanced financial education. It doesn't require luck. It requires something much rarer. It requires self-control. It requires patience. It requires being willing to be boring, to not impress anyone, to say no to immediate gratification. And that, in a culture designed to make you spend, is revolutionary. Warren says that the most important thing he learned wasn't how to make money, it was how not to lose it. And the most common way to lose money isn't in bad investments. It's in unnecessary expenses, in inflated lifestyles, in buying things you don't need with money. You don't have to impress people you don't know. And every time you do that, you're destroying margin. You're selling your future for a present you'll forget in 6 months. So what do you do with $40,000 a year? You don't try to look rich. You don't chase the lifestyle you see on social media. You don't go into debt for things that depreciate. You do the opposite. You reduce your fixed costs as much as you can. You avoid unnecessary monthly payments. You build an emergency fund as if your life depended on it, because in a way, it does. And you protect your margin as if it were the most valuable thing you have. Because it is. And when you do that, something magical starts to happen. You start sleeping better. You start negotiating better at work. You start making decisions from abundance instead of fear. And little by little, without anyone noticing, you start building a life that's yours. A life that doesn't depend on a paycheck. A life where you have real options. Where you can say no. Where you can help. Where you can choose. And that's what 40,000 can do. Not make you rich, but give you something much better. Peace of mind, control, quiet freedom. And when you reach 60 with margin, with options, with peace of mind, you realize that was always the goal. Not to accumulate, not to impress, but to live without fear. And building that doesn't require a 6-figure salary. It requires discipline, patience, and the willingness to protect your margin when everyone is telling you to spend it. Because in the end, real wealth isn't what you show. It's what you protect. It's the space you create between your income and your expenses. It's the peace of mind of knowing you'll be okay no matter what happens. And that is priceless. That's what you build today so your future self can live in peace